While it is legal and often necessary to euthanize aggressive or wayward animals, including grizzly bears, some people fight against the act because they believe it isn't humane enough. But have we ever stopped to consider the extent of the damage these animals can cause? From severe injuries to tragic loss of life, the consequences of such encounters are profound. Join us in this video as we recount stories where bears were euthanized due to the immense carnage they left behind. The Peterson family's road trip began with the promise of winter adventure. William and Laura Peterson, both in their late 30s, had carefully planned the journey as a way to reconnect as a family before the chaos of the new year fully set in. Accompanied by their 2 children, 9-year-old Emily and 6-year-old Jonah, they traversed the sprawling, snow-dusted landscapes of Montana in their gray minivan. The vehicle was stuffed with blankets, snacks, winter gear, and the occasional stuffed animal, a typical family outing in the picturesque wilderness. On January 5, 2025, after a long day of driving along winding, frozen highways and across sweeping plains blanketed in white, the Petersons decided to stop for the night. They pulled into a desolate rest area near the edge of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, a remote and rugged expanse of forest known for its natural beauty and untamed wildlife. The stop was isolated, surrounded by towering evergreens and bathed in the inky blackness of a moonless night. Even the stars seemed swallowed by the vast, frigid sky. Exhaustion pressed down on the family, and William decided to turn off the engine and sleep in the van until morning. They would resume their journey at first light, well-rested and ready for another day of adventure. Unbeknownst to the Petersons, the harsh Montana winter had driven the region's wildlife to the brink of desperation. Weeks of heavy snowstorms and sub-zero temperatures had buried food sources beneath thick ice, leaving animals starving and restless. Among these was a massive grizzly bear, gaunt from hunger, its instincts overtaken by the need to survive. Driven out of hibernation prematurely, the bear, normally an apex predator that avoided humans, had grown bold in its search for sustenance. It had been wandering the area for hours before the Petersons arrived, drawn by the faint aroma of discarded food and human activity lingering in the cold night air. Inside the van, the Peterson family slept soundly, unaware of the looming threat outside. Their breaths fogged the windows, condensation forming small beads that streaked down the glass. Wrapped in blankets, Emily clutched her favorite stuffed bear while Jonah snuggled close to his mother. Outside, the grizzly prowled closer, its dark eyes fixed on the vehicle. It sniffed the air, the potent mix of human scent and food scraps igniting a primal drive. The bear, even in its weakened state, was a formidable creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall on its hind legs and weighing close to 800 pounds despite its emaciation. The attack began without warning. A thunderous crash shattered the stillness of the night as the bear hurled its massive body against the side of the van. The vehicle rocked violently, and one of the side windows exploded inward, spraying glass across the seats. The sudden noise jolted the family awake, confusion and fear gripping them as they struggled to comprehend what was happening. The grizzly, now frenzied, forced its head through the jagged opening, its breath steaming in the frigid air as it let out a guttural roar. Panic erupted inside the van. William, nearest to the broken window, reached for the emergency flare gun he had packed, his hands trembling with adrenaline. The bear's claws scraped against the metal frame as it clawed its way further into the vehicle, its massive body contorting unnaturally in the confined space. The air filled with the sharp tang of blood and the stench of the bear's matted fur. William raised the flare gun and fired. The bright red flash briefly illuminated the chaos, casting jagged shadows on the snow-covered ground outside. The flare struck the bear's shoulder, burning its fur, but instead of retreating, the pain seemed to enrage it further. With a powerful swipe of its paw, the grizzly struck William across the chest, the force throwing him back against the dashboard. Blood spattered the windshield, and William collapsed, his breath shallow as he fought to stay conscious. Laura, clutching her children, tried to shield them from the advancing predator. Emily and Jonah clung to their mother, their cries drowned out by the bear's growls and the sound of its claws tearing through the seats. Laura screamed as the bear turned its attention to her, its massive paw raking across her shoulder and pulling her toward the front of the van. She thrashed and kicked, her instincts screaming at her to protect her children, but the bear's strength was overwhelming. Its teeth sank into her leg, dragging her closer as she fought in vain. In the chaos, Emily and Jonah huddled together in the corner of the van, their small bodies pressed against the cold metal. Emily whispered comforting words to her younger brother, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. The bear's frenzied movements filled the confined space, and within moments, its attention turned to the children. A single, brutal swipe silenced their cries. Miles away, a passing motorist heard the sounds of the attack, a mix of guttural roars and piercing screams cutting through the silent night. At first, the driver hesitated, the strange noises raising an unease he couldn't ignore. Finally, he decided to investigate, turning his vehicle toward the isolated rest area. His headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the scene. As he pulled up to the van, the sight was haunting. The van sat eerily still, its side window shattered, and the snow surrounding it stained a deep red. The motorist approached cautiously, shining a flashlight into the vehicle. Inside, he found the Peterson family, their lifeless bodies bearing the brutal marks of the bear's attack. The interior was in shambles, a chilling testament to the grizzly's raw power. The bear was nowhere to be seen, having retreated into the forest after sating its hunger. Authorities arrived shortly after, their faces pale as they surveyed the gruesome aftermath. Tracks in the snow revealed the bear's path back into the wilderness, and a team of wildlife officials and hunters began the grim task of tracking the animal. It took 2 days to locate the bear, which remained dangerously aggressive and in poor condition. Recognizing the threat it posed, officials euthanized the animal. The Peterson family's tragic story spread quickly, sparking outrage and grief. Experts explained that such attacks were rare, serving as a grim reminder of what happens when wildlife and human activity intersect under desperate circumstances. The incident led to immediate changes in how rest areas near wilderness regions were managed. Bear-proof trash bins were installed, and warning signs urged travelers to secure their food and remain vigilant. Educational campaigns highlighted the importance of respecting bear habitats and avoiding actions that could lure them closer to human settlements. For the Petersons, however, these changes came too late. Their story became a chilling cautionary tale, a reminder of the unpredictable dangers that exist in the wild. The crisp October air settled over the dense forests of Idaho as Mike Thompson, an experienced hunter in his late 30s, trekked through the remote wilderness. The leaves were a vibrant mix of gold and crimson, and the rustling canopy above masked the distant sounds of the forest. Mike had been hunting for over a decade, drawn to the solitude and challenge of tracking game in rugged terrain. This solo trip was no different, a chance to disconnect from the chaos of modern life and immerse himself in the wild. Mike had spent most of the day moving silently through the underbrush, his rifle slung over his shoulder and his eyes scanning for signs of deer. He followed faint trails, observed broken twigs, and noted fresh tracks in the soft earth. Hours of patient tracking finally paid off when he spotted a young buck grazing near a clearing by a creek. Moving with practiced precision, Mike raised his rifle, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The deer fell instantly, its lifeless body collapsing into the tall grass. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mike worked quickly to field dress the deer, his hands steady despite the chill that crept into the air. He chose a spot near the creek to set up camp, reasoning that the water source would be convenient for cleaning his tools and preparing his dinner. The campsite was primitive but sufficient. A small fire crackled in the center, casting flickering shadows against the trees. His modest tent stood a few feet away. The scent of the fresh kill lingered in the air as he hung the meat on a sturdy tree branch, believing it was high enough to deter scavengers. The forest grew quieter as night fell, the chorus of birds replaced by the occasional hoot of an owl. Mike sat by the fire, his body weary but his spirits high. He had achieved what he came for and planned to pack up early the next morning to return to his truck with his prize. As the embers of the fire glowed faintly, Mike retreated to his tent, zipping himself into his sleeping bag and letting the fatigue of the day pull him into a deep sleep. Unbeknownst to him, the scent of the deer had carried far through the forest. It reached the nostrils of a grizzly bear, a massive creature driven by instinct and hunger. The bear had been roaming the area, its natural food sources dwindling as the season shifted toward winter. The aroma of fresh meat was irresistible, and it followed the trail with single-minded determination. In the early hours of the morning, Mike stirred in his tent as the sound of heavy breathing and snapping twigs grew louder. Before he could fully process the situation, the bear tore through the fabric of his tent with terrifying force. The sheer speed and ferocity of the attack left Mike disoriented, his body jolted awake by adrenaline and the blinding pain of claws raking across his side. The bear's immense weight pinned him down, its growls reverberating through the air. Mike fought back with everything he had, his hands scrambling for anything he could use as a weapon. He grabbed a hunting knife from his pack and slashed at the bear's shoulder, but the thick fur and muscle absorbed much of the blow. The bear responded with a swipe of its massive paw, sending Mike sprawling across the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Desperate to survive, Mike tried to reach his rifle, which lay just beyond his grasp. The bear, however, was relentless, its focus shifting between Mike and the hanging deer. It bit down on Mike's leg, dragging him closer to the creek. As he struggled to kick free, the pain was excruciating, each movement sending shockwaves through his battered body. Summoning what strength he had left, Mike plunged the knife into the bear's flank, causing it to momentarily release him. The bear let out a deafening roar, its attention now divided between the man and the kill it sought to claim. It turned to the hanging deer, ripping it down with ease, the branch snapping under the strain. The bear dragged the carcass a short distance before returning to Mike, who lay motionless on the ground, his breath shallow and his vision fading. Satisfied that the threat had been neutralized, the bear eventually retreated with the deer, disappearing into the forest. As the first light of dawn began to break, the campsite was left in ruins, shredded fabric, scattered supplies, and bloodstains marked the site of the brutal encounter. Mike's body lay still, battered and broken, a grim testament to the unforgiving power of nature. Days later, a group of hunters passing through the area stumbled upon the scene. The sight was haunting. Mike's lifeless body, marked by deep gashes and bruises, lay surrounded by the remnants of his camp. The hunters radioed for help, and a search team arrived to recover his body. The discovery sent shockwaves through the local community, a stark reminder of the risks inherent in venturing into bear country. Wildlife authorities tracked the bear using the blood trail and signs it had left behind. When they located the animal, it was still in the area, guarding what remained of the deer carcass. The bear was euthanized to prevent further attacks, a decision that sparked both relief and sorrow among locals and conservationists. Mike's death became a rallying cry for increased awareness and safety measures for hunters and outdoor enthusiasts. The park implemented strict guidelines on food storage, emphasizing the importance of hanging meat at least 10 feet off the ground and 50 yards away from campsites. Hunters were also urged to carry bear-proof containers and ensure they had immediate access to bear spray at all times. Mike's family and friends mourned his loss, remembering him as a skilled outdoorsman who loved the wilderness deeply. His story spread beyond Idaho, reaching hunting and hiking communities across the country. Discussions on solo trips in bear territory gained momentum, with experts stressing the importance of group travel and noisemaking to avoid surprising wildlife. Though Mike's life ended tragically, his story served as a powerful reminder of the wilderness's unpredictable nature. For those who continued to venture into the forests of Idaho, his legacy was a somber warning etched into the landscape, a cautionary tale of respect for the wild and the fragile line between adventure and survival. The Colorado Rockies, blanketed in pristine snow and shimmering under the pale light of a winter sun, offered a surreal beauty that drew outdoor enthusiasts from across the world. Among them was Kathy Reynolds, a 38-year-old avid snowshoer who often sought solitude in the mountains. She had spent years honing her skills, navigating treacherous trails, and pushing her limits in some of the harshest environments. January 2022 marked another chapter in her love affair with the wilderness, and she planned a solo trek into a remote part of the Rockies, a place she had visited before, but never in the dead of winter. The morning of her hike was calm, the sky a deep blue against the jagged peaks. Kathy parked her vehicle at a trailhead seldom used in winter and strapped on her snowshoes, ensuring her pack was secured with essentials, food, water, a GPS, and an emergency beacon. The air was crisp, biting at her cheeks, but the exhilaration of the adventure ahead dulled the cold. She set off, her snowshoes crunching rhythmically against the frozen ground. The trail was desolate, the usual signs of human activity erased by the season's heavy snowfall. Kathy reveled in the silence, interrupted only by the distant call of a raven or the whisper of wind through the pines. As she ascended higher, the world seemed untouched, a vast expanse of white stretching endlessly in all directions. Unbeknownst to Kathy, the serene beauty concealed an anomaly. A black bear, driven from its hibernation by hunger and unusual winter weather, was roaming the area. The bear's natural food sources, berries, insects, and smaller mammals, were scarce, forcing it to search relentlessly for sustenance. The creature had been wandering at lower elevations, but deep snow and harsh conditions pushed it into more isolated terrain. Kathy's path unknowingly intersected with the bear's desperate search. By late afternoon, Kathy had covered significant ground, her trail winding through narrow valleys and dense stands of pine. She stopped briefly to eat, her breath visible in the frigid air as she surveyed the landscape. The snow was deep here, layered like a quilt over fallen logs and boulders, and the sky had begun to shift, clouds gathering in a foreboding blanket. Deciding to press on and find a suitable clearing to rest, she adjusted her pack and continued. As she moved through a wooded section of the trail, an unnatural quiet descended. Even the wind seemed to pause. Kathy, experienced in the subtleties of the wilderness, noticed the shift but attributed it to the weather. What she didn't realize was that the bear, having caught her scent hours earlier, was tracking her. The animal's dark shape blended into the forest shadows, its movements almost imperceptible as it closed the distance. When the bear attacked, it came with the suddenness of a nightmare. Kathy barely registered the sound of heavy footfalls before the full weight of the animal slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. She tumbled into the snow, her snowshoes twisting awkwardly beneath her. Disoriented, she gasped for air as the bear loomed over her, its breath visible in the freezing air. The animal's eyes were wild, driven by hunger and instinct, and its claws glinted in the waning light. Kathy's survival instincts kicked in as the bear lashed out, its claws ripping through her jacket and biting into her flesh. She screamed, the sound muffled by the surrounding forest, and swung her trekking pole at the bear's head. The improvised weapon connected, but it barely fazed the massive animal. The bear swiped again, sending the pole flying and tearing at her arm. Pinned beneath its weight, Kathy fought desperately, using her hands to shield her face and neck. The bear's strength was overwhelming, each movement pushing her deeper into the snow. She kicked and thrashed, her snowshoes hindering her movements. Her pack, still strapped to her shoulders, offered some protection, but the bear's claws found flesh with terrifying precision. Blood stained the snow as Kathy's movements slowed, her strength ebbing away with each passing second. She reached for the emergency beacon in her pack, but the bear lunged at her hand, its teeth sinking into her glove and crushing the bones beneath. Her cries echoed briefly before fading, swallowed by the vastness of the wilderness. As quickly as the attack began, it ended. The bear, satisfied or perhaps spooked by her fading resistance, dragged its massive frame away, leaving Kathy broken and bleeding in the snow. The light drained from the sky as a storm began to move in, the wind carrying the faint sound of her labored breaths into the void. Days later, a group of snowshoers on a separate trek stumbled upon the scene. Drawn by the storm's aftermath, they noticed the telltale signs of a struggle, disturbed snow, bloodstains, and discarded gear. They followed the trail and found Kathy's body, frozen in the position where she had fallen. Her injuries told a grim story, deep gashes across her torso and arms, puncture wounds on her legs, and a mangled hand. Her face bore the marks of her desperate struggle, a haunting testament to her final moments. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Winter bear attacks were exceedingly rare, and the circumstances of Kathy's death defied conventional wisdom. Experts speculated that the bear's unusual behavior was linked to the erratic weather patterns and dwindling food supplies caused by climate change. The tragedy served as a stark reminder that even the most experienced outdoor enthusiasts were not immune to the unpredictability of nature. Kathy's story ignited discussions about safety measures for winter hikers and snowshoers. Rangers and wildlife officials emphasized the importance of traveling in groups, carrying bear spray even in winter, and understanding the potential dangers of venturing into remote areas. Kathy's family, devastated by her loss, worked with local authorities to raise awareness, ensuring her death would not be in vain. In the months that followed, signs were posted at trailheads throughout the region, warning hikers of bear activity even during hibernation season. Educational campaigns targeted outdoor enthusiasts, urging them to respect the wilderness and its inhabitants. Kathy's name became synonymous with these efforts, her love for the mountains immortalized in a cautionary tale that would resonate for years to come. The Kenai Peninsula, known for its pristine wilderness and rugged beauty, often drew volunteers passionate about preserving the environment. In August 2023, a team of such volunteers from a wildlife preservation group arrived to conduct a cleanup effort in one of the peninsula's remote regions. The area, a mix of dense forest and open meadows, was beautiful but wild, home to moose, caribou, and, most notably, grizzly bears. The volunteers, aware of the potential dangers, had been briefed on safety protocols, but the sheer expanse of the wilderness often made encounters with wildlife unpredictable. Lisa Hartley, a 31-year-old environmentalist and frequent volunteer, was particularly eager to contribute. She loved the outdoors and was no stranger to remote areas, having participated in several conservation projects over the years. The idea of making a tangible difference while immersed in nature had always been her calling. On this particular trip, Lisa and her group were tasked with cleaning up debris left behind by illegal camping sites near a stream teeming with salmon, a critical feeding ground for the region's grizzlies. The team began early, splitting into smaller groups to cover more ground. Equipped with gloves, trash bags, and bear spray, they moved methodically, collecting everything from rusted cans to abandoned fishing lines. Lisa, always enthusiastic, worked ahead of the group. Her goal was to clear as much as possible before the afternoon heat set in. She moved steadily, her boots crunching against the gravel as she carried a bulging trash bag in one hand and a grabber tool in the other. As Lisa ventured farther from the main group, the forest grew denser. The sunlight filtering through the tall pines cast shifting patterns on the ground, and the distant sound of rushing water mingled with the occasional chirp of birds. She was focused on her task, stooping to pick up a piece of plastic, when a sudden movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. Just ahead, stepping out from the underbrush, was a massive grizzly bear. The bear was startlingly close, its size and presence immediately overwhelming. Its fur was a tawny brown, matted in places, and its dark eyes locked onto Lisa with a mix of curiosity and wariness. This wasn't the first time Lisa had seen a bear in the wild, but never at such proximity. Her pulse quickened as she instinctively raised her arms to make herself appear larger. She began to back away slowly, keeping her eyes on the bear, just as she had been taught during safety briefings. The bear, however, was not retreating. Likely startled by Lisa's presence and driven by hunger, it was late summer, a time when bears urgently fatten themselves for the winter. The animal began to huff and lower its head, a clear sign of aggression. Lisa's attempts to de-escalate the situation failed. Within seconds, the bear charged, its speed and power utterly breathtaking. Lisa barely had time to react. The bear struck her with the force of a freight train, knocking her to the ground. The impact left her winded, her bear spray tumbling from her grasp and rolling just out of reach. The animal's massive paws pinned her as its claws tore into her backpack and jacket. She screamed and thrashed, instinctively raising her arms to shield her face and neck. The bear bit down on her shoulder, the pain searing and immediate as blood began to soak through her clothes. Despite the overwhelming fear and agony, Lisa's survival instincts kicked in. She kicked and squirmed, trying to make herself a harder target. She managed to grab a nearby stick and jab at the bear's face, aiming for its eyes. The bear flinched but quickly retaliated, swiping at her legs with razor-sharp claws. Each blow felt like a sledgehammer, and Lisa's strength was rapidly waning. Meanwhile, the other volunteers, hearing her distant screams, dropped their gear and ran toward the commotion. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. Lisa trapped beneath the bear, her clothes shredded and blood pooling on the forest floor. Acting quickly, 2 volunteers grabbed nearby rocks and began shouting and throwing them at the bear. Another fumbled with their bear spray, finally managing to discharge it in the animal's direction. The spray worked. The bear, coughing and snarling, released Lisa and retreated into the woods, its massive frame disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The volunteers rushed to Lisa's side. She was conscious but gravely injured, her body covered in deep gashes and puncture wounds. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin was pale from blood loss. Using their first aid training, the volunteers applied pressure to her wounds and wrapped her in whatever clothing and materials they had to keep her warm. A satellite phone was used to call for help, but the remote location meant it would take time for rescue teams to arrive. For over an hour, the volunteers stayed with Lisa, offering her words of encouragement and doing everything they could to stabilize her. When the medevac helicopter finally arrived, the paramedics worked quickly to load her onto a stretcher and transport her to the nearest hospital. Despite the best efforts of the medical team, Lisa succumbed to her injuries en route to the hospital. Her death sent shockwaves through the wildlife preservation community and the small town near the peninsula. The tragedy sparked intense scrutiny of the protocols for volunteer work in bear territory. Experts highlighted the need for stricter guidelines, including mandatory group cohesion, better training in bear behavior, and the use of more robust deterrents such as electric fences around worksites. Lisa Hartley's death became a sobering reminder of the risks inherent in protecting nature. A memorial was erected near the site of the attack, bearing her name and a message about the importance of respecting wildlife for those who continued to volunteer in remote areas. Her story served as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration, a testament to the passion and courage of those who dedicate their lives to preserving the natural world, even at great personal cost. The morning of August 18, 2024, began like any other for Jerry Thompson. At 43 years old, he had worked at the small gas station on the outskirts of Bozeman, Montana, for nearly 2 decades. The station sat on the edge of the forest, a peaceful location frequented by travelers heading toward the wilderness of Wyoming. Jerry appreciated the solitude of the area, though he was well aware of the potential dangers posed by wildlife. The station had seen its fair share of deer, coyotes, and even the occasional black bear wandering near the dumpsters, but these encounters had never escalated into anything serious. The air was warm and still that morning, with the faint hum of insects and the occasional rush of a passing car breaking the silence. Jerry's routine was predictable: refueling cars, restocking the shelves inside, and tidying up the area around the pumps. The scent of coffee and gasoline mingled in the air as he chatted briefly with a customer while filling up an SUV. A typical morning, quiet, uneventful, and serene. Unbeknownst to Jerry, a grizzly bear had been roaming the nearby woods for hours, driven out of its usual range by habitat disruption and the lingering effects of a harsh summer drought. With food becoming scarcer in the wilderness, the bear had grown bold, venturing closer to human settlements in search of sustenance. It had caught the scent of discarded food from the gas station's poorly secured trash bins, an irresistible lure for the starving animal. Jerry was focused on his task, oblivious to the shadowy figure that emerged from the trees. The bear appeared suddenly, its massive form moving with deceptive quietness for a creature of its size. Standing over 6 feet on all fours and weighing nearly 700 pounds, the grizzly was a force of nature, its shaggy coat flecked with dirt, its muscles rippling with every step. The bear's nostrils flared as it inhaled the mix of human activity and food waste, a potent combination that pulled it closer. It wasn't until the customer in the SUV pointed frantically behind him that Jerry turned and saw the bear. His heart sank. The grizzly was no more than 20 yards away, its small, dark eyes locked onto him. For a split second, Jerry froze. He had seen bears before, but never a grizzly this close. Panic surged through him as he realized the bear was advancing, its pace quickening as it closed the distance. Instinct took over, and Jerry dropped the fuel nozzle, spilling gasoline onto the ground as he bolted toward the convenience store. The bear, startled by the sudden movement, let out a guttural roar and charged. The speed of the creature was shocking. What had seemed like a lumbering giant moments earlier now moved with terrifying agility. Jerry didn't make it far. The bear slammed into him with the force of a freight train, knocking him to the pavement. The impact left him dazed, his ears ringing as he tried to scramble away. The grizzly reared up, its immense weight pressing down on him as its claws raked across his back and shoulders. Pain seared through him as the claws tore through his uniform, the fabric offering no protection against the raw power of the attack. The customer in the SUV, paralyzed with fear, slammed the vehicle into gear and sped away to seek help. Jerry was left alone, struggling against the bear's overwhelming strength. He kicked and thrashed, trying desperately to fend off the attack, but the grizzly was relentless. Its jaws clamped onto his arm, the pressure snapping bones as if they were twigs. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the pavement a deep crimson as the bear roared again, its breath hot and fetid against his face. Despite the agony, Jerry's survival instincts refused to give up. He managed to grab a metal trash lid that had fallen nearby, using it as a makeshift shield to block the bear's teeth and claws. The bear swiped at the lid, bending it like tin foil, but the brief distraction gave Jerry a moment to crawl toward the pumps. His vision blurred, his strength fading, but he clung to the hope that someone would arrive to help. The bear, perhaps sensing that its prey was weakening, turned its attention to the trash bins. The pungent smell of discarded food scraps drew it away from Jerry, giving him a fleeting reprieve. But the damage was done. His injuries were catastrophic, his body battered and broken. Minutes later, the sound of approaching sirens echoed through the forest. Local authorities, alerted by the fleeing customer, arrived on the scene. They found the grizzly rummaging through the trash bins, its muzzle smeared with remnants of discarded food. Assessing the immediate danger to the public, the officers made the grim decision to euthanize the bear. A single rifle shot rang out, and the massive creature collapsed, its reign of terror brought to an end. Jerry was rushed to the hospital, but the extent of his injuries was too severe. Despite the efforts of paramedics and doctors, he succumbed to his wounds later that afternoon. The attack sent shockwaves through the community, a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers posed by living in close proximity to wildlife. In the days that followed, local businesses and residents re-evaluated their practices. The gas station installed bear-proof trash bins and implemented strict protocols for securing food waste. Signs were posted, warning visitors about the potential presence of wildlife and urging caution. Wildlife experts emphasized the importance of understanding bear behavior, explaining that the grizzly's actions were not malicious but driven by survival instincts. Jerry's death became a somber cautionary tale, his name etched into the collective memory of Bozeman as a reminder of the fragile balance between humans and nature. While his loss was deeply felt, it spurred meaningful changes that would help protect others in the future. The forest remained wild, its beauty and danger intertwined, a testament to the raw, untamed power of the natural world. In early June 2023, the Alaskan wilderness was alive with the untamed beauty of spring. The snow had melted, revealing emerald green valleys and sparkling waterways, drawing wildlife and adventurers alike. For Alex Rodriguez, a 36-year-old seasoned fisherman, it was the perfect time to visit a remote lake nestled deep within the wilderness. Alex was no stranger to solitude or the challenges of nature. He had spent years fishing in isolated areas, priding himself on his ability to read the land and respect the wildlife that shared it. He had no reason to believe this trip would be any different. Alex arrived at the lake in the early morning, his aluminum fishing boat strapped to the roof of his truck. The lake was a pristine, mirror-like expanse surrounded by dense forest, a place few ventured due to its isolation. The tranquility suited Alex, who often found peace in the rhythmic casting of his fishing line and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface. He unloaded his boat, packed with essentials, a cooler for his catch, a small tackle box, and a thermos of coffee. He pushed off into the water, eager to enjoy a day of uninterrupted fishing. The morning passed uneventfully. Alex caught several fish, their silvery bodies glinting in the sun as he reeled them in. He placed them in the cooler, satisfied with his haul. Around midday, as the sun climbed higher, he noticed subtle signs of wildlife along the shore, a rustling in the bushes, faint paw prints in the soft mud. Bears were common in this area, but Alex had never had a close encounter. He kept his fish cooler sealed tightly and stored his lunch in a bear-proof container, precautions he took on every trip. What Alex didn't realize was that a grizzly bear had caught the scent of his fish. The bear, a large male emerging from a lean winter, had been patrolling the area for days, searching for an easy meal. The tantalizing aroma of freshly caught fish carried across the water, drawing the bear to the lake's edge. It remained hidden at first, watching Alex from the dense underbrush, its dark eyes following the movement of the boat as Alex shifted positions on the water. By mid-afternoon, the bear's patience waned. It moved closer to the water, its powerful muscles rippling beneath a thick coat of fur. Alex, preoccupied with untangling his line, failed to notice the large predator stalking him. The boat was small and low to the water, an inviting target for the bear driven by hunger and instinct. It entered the lake, its massive paws making almost no sound as it swam toward the boat. The first sign of danger came too late. Alex, sensing movement behind him, turned just in time to see the grizzly closing in. Panic surged through him as the bear lunged, slamming its immense body into the side of the boat. The force tipped the vessel violently, throwing Alex and his gear into the frigid, fast-moving water. Disoriented, he surfaced, gasping for air, the icy cold numbing his limbs almost instantly. The overturned boat offered little refuge. Alex tried to grab hold of it, but the bear was relentless. It swiped at him with a massive paw, the blow sending him reeling back into the water. The predator's strength was terrifying, each movement seemed calculated, its focus unwavering. Alex kicked and thrashed, desperate to put distance between himself and the bear, but the cold sapped his energy. The grizzly closed the gap with shocking speed, its jaws clamping down on his arm and dragging him beneath the surface. The water churned as Alex struggled, his survival instincts pushing him to fight despite the overwhelming odds. He punched at the bear's snout, clawed at its face, anything to break free. For a moment, the bear released him, but it was only to reposition its grip. Its powerful jaws latched onto his shoulder, pulling him deeper into the lake. Alex's lungs burned as he fought to stay conscious, the weight of the bear pressing him downward. The water muffled the sounds of the struggle, turning his desperate gasps into faint ripples on the surface. Minutes felt like hours. Alex's movements grew weaker as the cold and lack of oxygen took their toll. The bear, perhaps sensing victory, dragged him closer to the shore, where the water shallowed. There, the predator released him briefly, inspecting its prey. Alex tried to crawl away, his body trembling and unresponsive, but the bear struck again, pinning him beneath its weight. This time, there was no escape. The predator held him under until the struggle ceased, the stillness of the lake returning as the ripples faded. It was days before Alex's body was discovered. A group of hikers passing through the area noticed the overturned boat and alerted authorities. Park rangers arrived, piecing together the events from the evidence left behind. The cooler of fish, still sealed, had been dragged to the shore and torn open. Tracks along the muddy bank confirmed the presence of a large grizzly, its movements methodical and deliberate. For a moment, the bear released him, but it was only to reposition its grip. Its powerful jaws latched onto his shoulder, pulling him deeper into the lake. Alex's lungs burned as he fought to stay conscious, the weight of the bear pressing him downward. The water muffled the sounds of the struggle, turning his desperate gasps into faint ripples on the surface. Minutes felt like hours. Alex's movements grew weaker as the cold and lack of oxygen took their toll. The bear, perhaps sensing victory, dragged him closer to the shore, where the water shallowed. There, the predator released him briefly, inspecting its prey. Alex tried to crawl away, his body trembling and unresponsive, but the bear struck again, pinning him beneath its weight. This time, there was no escape. The predator held him under until the struggle ceased, the stillness of the lake returning as the ripples faded. It was days before Alex's body was discovered. A group of hikers passing through the area noticed the overturned boat and alerted authorities. Park rangers arrived, piecing together the events from the evidence left behind. The cooler of fish, still sealed, had been dragged to the shore and torn open. Tracks along the muddy bank confirmed the presence of a large grizzly, its movements methodical and deliberate.